He was very adamant he wouldn't join my campaign. He even called me, well, mad to do such a thing. Aruna didn't smile. He sat on the chair and said, I'm not here from the court of Bajrang the infidel. I'm here from General Tar's camp, a revolutionary in spirit. I do not understand your monkey politics, my dear friend. Kali laughed. It's a long story of betrayals and fighting and whatnot, but we have a strong leader and we have a strong cause and we want to join forces with you. Aruna looked up at Drupti. Can we speak in private though? Drupti began to move when Kali caught her hand. No, I would love it if she stays here. She's my sister. My apologies. Then Aruna had a refined way of speaking, almost aristocratic. I have traveled from the outskirts of Dandak to meet you. General Tar sends his regards. From under the shawl he pulled out a sheath sword, a token of friendship. Kali was impressed. Drupti noticed this as he picked up the sword and studied the inscriptions over it. What does it say? Fate favors the brave. He sheathed it back. You have my attention now. How can I be of service? Aruna was glad, almost pulling up a little smile. My lord, we want to join forces with you and become a part of your campaign, as I have said, and we also know you had a fallout with the Nagas. You need a powerful. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Kali waved his hand nonchalantly. What matters is that Lord Bajrang apparently has a hold on you. We want you to help us get rid of him from the throne just so you could join me. He coughed, laughing loudly. Let me get this straight. You are ready to join forces with me if I send my men to the borders of Dandak to fight your little battles with Bajrang? Not just join forces. Aruna was calm even though Drupti was offended the way Kali explained the situation, but to give you something powerful in return. And what would that be? From under the shawl he pulled out a scroll and whipped it open, over which was a design that Drupti had already seen. Her blood ran cold when she saw the inscription of the Eye of Brahma divided into 4 parts, albeit more detailed. It had a lot of information compared to the one in the book that she had read. What is this? Kali's voice turned grave. The Eye of Brahma. No one knows how it came to be. There are tales that Lord Brahma handed it to us, but I do not believe it. We were researching, and a long time back, the time when Lord Indra walked the land of Ilavarti, he had hired a bunch of physicists at his disposal. He was a man of science. Lord Indra, with the help of the physicists and the Somalta plants that he had grown here, he had been able to create 4 shards. Each shard represents something: the past, the present, the future, and the alternate reality. Alternate reality? It shows the outcome of your actions before you act on them. Kali nodded. Interesting. He looked up at Aruna. And you think Bajrang has this? Not all 4, unfortunately, but this one. He pointed at the middle shard, which showed the present. It has the capability of making you see whatever impending battles or revolts you are facing right now. You can see each move of your enemies and plan things accordingly. What if it doesn't work? I have seen it work, my lord. The reason Bajrang didn't join forces with you back then was because he had seen what you were doing that time, shaking hands with Nagas and Yakshas, and Bajrang hated that, so he sees everything. Whatever is limited to his knowledge, that's something I can use. Kali turned to Drupti for an acknowledgement, who quietly nodded back at him. So to make it simple, you want my soldiers with you to fight your cause, get the throne of Dandak, and in return you shall give me your support and this shard? Aruna nodded. What if you decide to keep my army and the shard and then choose to betray me? Aruna shook his head. You out of all people know when a Vanal promises he keeps his oath here, but we live in a world where anything can happen. Kali shrugged. What about the other 3 shards? No one knows where they are. Aruna dismissed. I can understand your skepticism, Lord Kali, but Kali waved his hand in dismissal. See, I don't care if you betray me, because I will instruct my soldiers to slaughter you the moment you turn your back on me. But you have made me curious, Captain. I am quite interested in this Eye of Brahma. I'm glad you can take 2,000 men of mine, but my lord, we need 5. Kali shook his head. No, you need only 2. If you bring me this, I will supply 5,000 more to guard your Dandak well. And please, your general, you can tell Coco to fetch you the army. Aruna reluctantly nodded. Yes, my lord, and he stood up and left the room. Drupti was silent as Kali played with the scroll and then the sword. Do you believe that the Eye of Brahma really exists? I don't know, brother. Kali shook his head. I wouldn't have believed it as well if he would have come a few months back. But now I do, after I have learnt about the Soma. There is certainly some magic out there in the world, I'm sure. Drupti nodded. She had seen enough magic in the world by fighting Simran. The thought made her shiver. Anyway, I should leave. Kali nodded, returning back to his work. You are doing a good job, brother. Talk to me when you can. I am here for you, hum. Drupti came forward and hugged Kali, putting her head on his shoulder, wrapping her arms around him. Be safe. Kali smiled, patting her back. Don't be so gushy about it now, shoo, he playfully chided. Drupti smiled and left the room as she faced Coco and Vikoko, Kali's guards standing outside like diligent army men. She walked away from them. As she pulled out the pouch she was hiding in her tight-fisted palms. She had taken it from Kali when she had hugged him. She opened the pouch where the blue fossil-like stones glimmered. There were only 2 of them. He was not a perfect man, but he was my father. It had been a few days since she had hidden herself in Lady Durukti's house, ordered to not go anywhere, and Lady Durukti was right. If Urvashi had gone out, a Rakshas or a Yaksh would have caught her. Lord Kali was quite serious about catching Urvashi. He had planned to put to her on trial just like her father. Though trials were a sham in this city, she thought about Vedanta, reminiscing the days she had spent with him. She remembered the time her mother had died. Vedanta, who had always been distant, had held her tight and clasped his hands in hers that day. He had been supportive. After that he had made sure to come every night to tell stories or talk about people, letting Urvashi know that she was an integral part of his life. Vedanta had confessed to Urvashi about how he had been disappointed when she had been born. He had wanted a son. Forgive me, my dear, I was a bad father. It had been 2 days since Vedanta's beheading. Urvashi was growing restless. She saw new servants entering her room. She hid under the bed when they appeared, but then she found out that the new servant was the same one Vedanta had had who had tended to Urvashi. She skid out of the bed. Urvashi closed the door behind. What are you doing in Lady Durukti's room? Hiding? She's helping me to stay alive. Oh, what a wonderful lady. Why are you here? Urvashi arched her brows. Lord Kali has employed us. Are you all right, my lady? What do you think? Urvashi wiped the dust off her face. I apologize for Lord Vedanta's passing. The servant shrieked. Urvashi nodded, wiping her sweaty forehead. I need to leave. Is there any keep my father left behind? What has happened to the fort? It has become an armory, my lady. Urvashi gritted her teeth. That despicable Kali. And she was in his sister's room. What are the chances she would backstab her like Kali had done to her father? My lady, I have something. The servant pulled it out from the apron. I found it in Lord Vedanta's room before the soldiers came to escort us. It was addressed to you, a letter, and you have been carrying it around. Urvashi took it, studying the envelope carefully. Never found a safe place to keep it other than with me. It might have some important information, and I didn't want to hand it to the usurpers. Urvashi smiled. You did a good job. Do you trust lady? I don't trust anyone, to be honest. She sliced the envelope. What do you intend to do? Urvashi softly smiled at the maid. I will let you know. Do not worry. I know one thing for sure. I shall take my father's throne. She paused. Do not tell anyone of my presence. The maid was reassured. Urvashi sat down on the bed as the maid left the room, and she began reading the letter. Dear Urvashi, what I am about to do can bring about some change in the way we have lived so far. But if I don't survive, I want you to know that I always wanted you to be happy, content. The time spent with you have been the greatest, and I choose to go with those memories rather than the ones I have spent as a king. A king can always be dethroned in front of his people. I hope I am doing the right thing. I do not know. My fingers shiver as I write this, for I feel I might not return from where I go. But I hope when you read this you form your own resolution, become stronger. You must realize my death could also be an opportunity for you to fight for the throne, fight for what's rightfully yours. You are a queen by birthright. Finally you can act like one. Love always, Daddy. Urvashi didn't shed tears. She felt her chest contracting, and then she lowered her eyes, folded the letter, and kept it clasped in her arms. Urvashi was thinking about how to escape when the door opened again, and she hid herself under the bed only to realize it was Lady Durukti. She was wearing a nose ring and a large shiny diamond necklace. For some reason she looked unsettled, thoughtful. She was holding and rubbing a pouch in her hand. What's wrong? Urvashi asked. Have you had your food? Yes, I had a maid from my fort to help me. Yes, Kali had enlisted them. Urvashi's blood boiled thinking about Kali being in the same premises as her. If only she could go there and cut him up. But Durukti had warned her from doing anything stupid. Lord Kali went with his guards everywhere. What's there in your hand? Nothing. Durukti kept it in the drawer. At that moment, to which Urvashi just felt odd, Durukti was hiding something perhaps, but she shifted her attention when Durukti continued. I met Arjun. I hope you remember him. Urvashi did. For being with Durukti meant conversing about these things. Durukti shared a lot of her insecurities with her. She had tried to convince Urvashi that Kali was not a bad man. She even talked about Kalki and Arjun, though Urvashi could never picture them since she had never met them, but they at least sounded better than Kali. What did he say? He wanted me to help him escape. Help him? I mean the prisoners, all of them. Urvashi arched her brows. That sounds ridiculous. It'll be a riot. And the thought of it just ignited a spark in her mind. It'll indeed be a riot, and that'll put a dent in Kali's regime, and she could take him out with their support. There must be more than 100 prisoners. As of now, the idea just kept growing to the point that her fingers danced, and she was getting excited about it. I know it'll be, and I'm just thinking it'll change everything. But he says they are innocent and they are mostly those your father had thrown in without sufficient evidence. If he did throw them in, there must be a good reason behind it, not according to Arjun. Whatever, it doesn't matter to me. What matters is, will they help honor among thieves, as the saying goes, and they might just be Urvashi's chance to get Lord Kali off the throne. But Urvashi had no intention of telling Durukti all this. I need to contemplate more about this. Sure. Durukti went to bed. As Urvashi laid her mattress on the ground, she turned over and started thinking. After a while she could hear Durukti snoring. She slowly went over to the drawer and opened it up to see the pouch, in which she found some blue stones. What the hell are these? Urvashi tightened the pouch and placed it back inside. She wrapped the shawl around her that belonged to Durukti and covered her face completely. With one last glance at Durukti, took her leave from the room. Her eyes were fixed on one goal as she walked the corridors of the fort, searching for her maid, because she knew what she had to do. She had to find her bag of all those illusionary tricks that her guru had given her, and she had to free those prisoners. Did she have a better plan? Mansa hadn't slept at all while going back. They returned by the same boat, and by this time Nanda had regained his strength. Even though he groaned with each row he made with the oar, Mansa's one hand was absolutely useless, so she had to pummel the waves of the river with her free hand, forcing her muscles to contract in sharp pain. There were an uncomfortable silence between them. I wonder what Vibhishna is up to these days, said Mansa. Lord Vibhishna has no control over his subjects, Nanda growled. As the wind blew on his face, Mansa understood what Nanda was talking about. In Ilavarti the land was divided into parts. Udayas consisted of Indragad, Varungad, Suryagad, Agnigad, and now Dandak. The other side, the lower half of it, was called Dakshini, which consisted of Suparnika, Nagpuri, Elam, and Bhanati, where Lord Vibhishna lived. He was the only Manav chieftain of the Dakshinis. Vibhishna was the sole ruler, and but still refrained from interfering in the council proceedings of these places. He was rich and abundantly gifted in grain and water, and he didn't need to rely on anyone. The only other peaceful ruler in, though Vibhishan had often had conflicts with Vedanta over their ideologies, he had a begrudging respect for the man. He has no control over anything, Mansa responded as her muscles grew exhausted from the roving, and they finally reached the shores of Nagpuri after a few hours. I have known him since I was a child. My father had sent me and Vasuki out there to be trained with Vibhishna. He was a child back then. We had loads of fun, but he was in fact a quiet kid. He still keeps to himself. Nanda rolled his eyes. They had reached Nagpuri at sundown, and the place was littered with sapphire-colored fire lights. They had an ingredient plucked from their own grass reserves that they mixed with the candle waxes to produce the color of the skies that they worshipped. What should we do now? Mansa asked Nanda. Before we meet Kadru, you come with me, and I will get a few mercenaries I know around the corner to help us and be on constant guard. Sure, Mansa nodded. And do you know these mercenaries as well as you know? Nanda grinned. Mansa wiped her face clean with the water as she was cooped. A small inn. Nanda had managed to get them a room here. The manager owed him. That man owes to everyone, and everyone owes to him. She would never understand Nanda. He was so many things at once. And as she went over to the bed and laid herself down, closing her eyes, waiting for Nanda to return from his meeting with those mercenaries, she began to picture them together. If there is no other woman should I be with? It had not been his fault but Vasuki's, and she almost felt bad for him. She began to think whether this plan would work or not, or whether she'll be free enough to control Nagpuri, get favors from Taraksha, and win the throne of Indragad from Kali, defeat him, and then do what? She hadn't thought about what she would do after this. It was her revenge plan for basically destroying her army, killing her brother. But after achieving the goal, she might just return back to Nagpuri, be with Nanda perhaps, and start a family. That sounded like a plan, and a smile came over her face at the thought. Nanda was surely a sore in a person's life, but for her he was someone she had taken a liking to, and he was helpful. He was just there for her sake whenever she wanted. She studied the intricate designs of the room. The Nagpuri inns weren't exactly peachy. The decor was just bad. The floorboards were tainted. The beds were more like mattresses on the ground with a little elevation from the wooden platform. The ceiling had a slight casual tapestry. There were firelights across the room, blue reflections, and Mansa's dark shadows danced as she moved inch by inch. She hated being here, but it was a good hiding place, better than being in her own place where Jamun would be waiting for her. Everyone wants their own revenge. Why was Jamun taking so much time to start his vendetta? Could he see that the city was weak and just jumped at the chance? Did he learn about Vasuki's death and that made him want to assume the throne? There were so many questions that Mansa had. She had no idea what Jamun was thinking. The man had no morals. He had gone behind Kadru's back and let people murder a family. Oh, how cheerful I used to be. Even though Vasuki wasn't perfect, she missed him. She missed those days she had spent with him since they were children. He had always teased her but also looked up to his big sister, always asking her for advice. I couldn't even save my baby brother. She didn't cry but she did feel her head shrinking, her gut feeling weird, and that was when the door opened and she was startled, jumping up only to realize it was Nanda. He had a straw bag with him from which he pulled out some loaves of bread and a curry to share. Mansa hungrily wolfed it down as she was famished. Nanda sat opposite to her on a cushion and just looked at her for a while before Mansa asked, "What is it?" "I have talked to the mercenaries. They are ready to do it for a sum of money. I have paid them as well." "You had money?" "Of course, I don't go around without it. How's your rib?" He touched his wound. "It hurts. I never thanked you for saving me." "You don't have to. I could see it." Mansa smiled, and before she could begin the discussion about her and Nanda pulled out a strange locket from the bag. "I want you to have this. Where did you hide this?" "I was carrying it around." He handed it to her. Mansa held it in her palms, looking at the sheen of the locket. It was a big glass amulet attached to a ribbon. "What is this?" "Got it from a trader when I was traveling before I heard about you coming here." "I don't know." Nanda frowned. "Thought it'll look nice on you, so I bought it. It's going to hinder me when I fight." "You aren't fighting. Why do you think I hired the mercenaries?" "I don't want us to die." "You want to fight a war from afar?" "I want us to be safe, that's all." "That's what I want." Mansa shook her head. "We are going right now to Kadru and then we are barging inside Jamun's house and taking his head with us. The other ministers wouldn't be happy. Once I'm in power, I wouldn't care what they think about." Nanda chuckled. "That's so you also are." Mansa sighed. "I wanted to tell you that after this is over, after we stop Jamun from basically ruining Nagpuri, we should talk about us." Nanda was stunned for a moment. His brows went up and he gasped, "Are you serious?" "I thought about it and it feels right." "Yeah, sure." Nanda couldn't stop grinning. "Stop smiling." "Oh no, I won't, darling." Mansa hit his shoulder playfully. "My sources say he is in Nagmandal." Nanda spoke. Mansa nodded. These sources might be the mercenaries who were out there asking around. They arrived at the little island of Nagmandal. The houses that stood here were owned by the important ministers. Initially Vasuki had bought a house there too, but after his death it had been sold off. "Also you must know," Nanda said as they walked towards the main entrance of Nagmandal, "I have alerted Vibhisna about the thing we are going to do." Mansa shot him a look. "Why?" "He wouldn't interfere. I know him. I just thought if this fails, it won't fail, and we don't need his help." Mansa was stringent about it, and as she reached the gates, the guards tried to question her, but the mercenaries, who were more than a dozen, grabbed them, pummeled them to the ground, and tossed them on the floor. Mansa opened the long bronze gates and walked on the corridor, her each step making a crackling noise as all the guards in Nagmandal were alarmed. Seeing Mansa with her own little army, the guards hesitated to make a move as the mercenaries raved around looking for a worthy challenge. She finally reached the main place where the long table was and the fire lamps were lit in the middle. She saw Kadru looking over some papers. Her men got alarmed on seeing Mansa, but they eased up when Kadru waved them off. "What is this, cousin?" "This is desperation." Mansa walked over. As she scanned the entire hall of the council, it was empty and the doors to each end of the hall were locked. She looked up the staircases and the balcony, which was isolated. "There is a traitor amongst us. I don't understand. Jamun is the one who is planning a treatise with the Supans for some reason, and he was the reason behind Vasuki's family's death." Kadru was confused. "But how's that possible? He was always there with me and he has been instrumental in rebuilding this city." "No, he's not. He's planning to join hands with the bloody Supans, my dear, so that he can get Amrit for himself and his men." Kadru nodded her head. "I understand. Amrit? You mean the Somalta?" Mansa nodded. "Why is he doing that?" "Taking revenge for what my father did to his father, perhaps." Kadru sighed. "Sister, I will be honest." Her voice was quite high. And that's when the doors opened. Jamun entered with Naga soldiers around him, a smile encased over his face. The soldiers that were inside the room pulled out their swords and pointed them towards their mercenaries and Nanda. Mansa was confused, her fingers shivering. "He didn't do it because of a petty revenge." Kadru completed her sentence. "He did it because he worshipped your father, but unlike him, you and your brother never wanted the Somas and wanted to stay away from the." A malicious grin swept her face. "We don't want that. We want to suck the Supans dry, for they have what belongs to us, gifted to us by the great Lord Shisha. We decided to acquire it even if it meant giving them the first win, which was Vasuki's family." "You?" Mansa gasped in horror, turning back, pulling out her dagger from the sheath. "You were part of this?" It was my plan, my dear sister, to send those assassins. Jamun doesn't like much bloodshed. Jamun shrugged at that statement, as if it wasn't true. I didn't want any complications, and there were none. I wouldn't have harmed you at all if you had been in Indragarh. But no, you had to come to the south, damage us. Our big grand plan of taking back what's rightfully ours. Mansa attacked Kadru, lurching from her place with the dagger. Kadru countered with a punch quicker than Mansa's stab. She fell back. Nanda yelled in horror, but Jamun's men shot an arrow right across his knee as he collapsed on the ground. Husband and wife planning their deaths together. How poetic. Kadru came over to Mansa, knelt down, and stared at her. You shall be executed, both of you, for interfering and talking to. After all, he was an idiot to welcome you, but hey, that's all right. The reason Mansa sighed, panting, Vasuki didn't fight for Amrit was because he had seen our father going mad because of it. He had seen what it did to people when they had it. It's because they didn't know how to use it, and now we do. And with that, Kadru punched Mansa in the gut as she lost consciousness, her worlds slowly colliding both in dreams and reality.